Good evening, one and all. Welcome to Vicarage Road, the place where Norwich City had a chance to reach the summit of the Championship this evening, but ultimately fell short with a 2-1 defeat here to fellow Premier League relegated side Watford. It was an evening where, if last week was about frustration for maybe the wrong reasons, this week, or the right reasons in terms of Dean Smith feeling they should have won this game, this was frustration for the wrong reasons, because it was a first half display where Norwich probably got everything they deserved and maybe even got let off a little bit with the missed penalty and with a goal. But from unbeaten in 9, it's now turned into 1 win in 5. It looks a little bit stodgy. It's hard to work out what they're trying to do. And there's plenty to dissect and probably not enough time to dissect it in. So here we go. I think, coming into this game, it was always going to be an interesting one. And it kind of kickstarts a really difficult run of games against teams who have aspirations of being in and around Norwich City and in and around those promotion spots, or those who maybe pose a challenge to the playoffs and will be in and around that particular contest. And they're teams where you look at it and you feel like it's going to, one way or the other, and I think we've said this numerous times, give us a real idea of where Norwich City are, what Norwich City are, or even who Norwich City are. And that kind of started negatively last week against Preston, although I wouldn't necessarily put them into that bracket. Today was or should hopefully serve as a major wake-up call for Norwich City, because they weren't at it. I think they lost to a team that wanted it more than them. I think they lost to a team that was better than them on the day, really. And some of the defending, which was kamikaze at points, was pretty dreadful. And when you gift teams 2-0 leads, particularly ones with the quality of Watford, in terms of the quality of player they have, maybe more so than the functioning or how they're functioning as an outfit at this moment in time, it becomes very difficult in any game, at any level of football, to turn that on its head and flip it around, particularly when the performance beforehand was so flat. And, I've just stood sort of down towards the away dugout listening to Dean Smith assess this game. And there was one thing that I really want to pick out, and I'll make a point of why I'm picking out in a moment. But he just told Radio Norfolk, Chris Gorham, that he felt that Watford as a team are pretty happy, pretty comfortable when teams are playing in front of them, and they can defend their spaces adequately and they can limit space. And actually, when teams are moving the ball in and around them, they're okay, they're settled, they're comfortable. And it's actually when teams are probably going against the ball or they're running towards their own goal, that's when they really have issues and they really struggle to defend. And you've probably seen that in recent games and the recent defeats they've had here and also on the road. So that's fine. But then I probably arrived at this game with the same theory. And when you have that theory, for me, it's then about having some pace and having some penetration and maybe even some just raw power on El Hernandez, for example, to get in behind, to get them on the back foot, to exploit those spaces. Because there were points in the first half and in the second half as well where the space was in behind Watford. And it's not particularly sexy or glamorous, but to clip a ball into there and to have an Onel Hernandez or someone running at them is a lot more dangerous than what I felt they did do, which was players coming into spaces. They tried to almost out-football Watford. So when Dean Smith says that and then says, well, I felt we had enough footballers to out-football them, the two statements don't match up. So you either believe that you needed to get in behind and hurt them, or you believed you needed to out-football them, not you needed to get in behind them and then put loads of technical players on the pitch in the hope of out-footballing them. So for me, it was a real mismatch, and it kind of looked like that. There was no real control. There was spaces in between Norwich's shape. They didn't press the centre-backs well enough. They got turned over pretty routinely, to be honest. And in transition, they were quite slow and lethargic. It was stodgy. They were making poor choices in possession. I still feel that in terms of their possessional play, they don't really have any direction or purpose or particular identity or ideas at points. And they kind of are trying to work overloads. But if they don't work those overloads, they really, really struggle to break teams down. And what we're seeing now, we're now at a point in the season where we can talk about trends and we can talk about where this Norwich City team are. And what it feels like in the last 5 games, actually, is that we're seeing a clear correlation between performances and results. And I think at points at the start of the season, those two have been pretty skew-whiffed. And I think we're now seeing that begin to marry up a little bit. And what's fearful from my perspective is they're in a really sticky place at the moment. And I don't really necessarily see that getting particularly better, which is why, and we'll come on to Tuesday. It feels like Tuesday is such a big moment in terms of this run and where Norwich City are at this moment in time. Dean Smith made a few changes for tonight. Angus Gunn in goal. I'll come back to him. He also brought Kieran Dowell in. Gabriel Sara wasn't in. Persisted with the same midfield three. And initially, it looked like he just kind of swapped Ramsey out, put Dowell in the 10 behind the front two of Sargent and Pukki. What he'd actually done was reverted to a 4-3-3. I've seen that enough now to say that the players in that particular shape don't function as that shape needs it to function. And you have a real mismatch between the quality of player that Norwich City have and the type of player they have, but also slotting that into a system that is really functional and really works. And it became a bit more of a 4-2-3-1 at points because Marcelino Nunez pushed on. But to be honest, he's kind of the shine that we've seen in perhaps his early performances have begun to wear off a little bit. And also Aaron Ramsey, who was on the bench tonight. So Norwich are in a position where they've probably got all of their midfield slots beyond probably Josh Sargent at the moment, where you're looking at it and feeling, yeah, you could come out, you could come out, you could come out. And the performances consistently as a unit isn't particularly great. And when you try and move the ball and you try and break teams down in that shape, you need to have clever combinations. You need to move the ball quickly. You need to be clever. You need to have good running off the ball. They didn't necessarily have that. You had almost them trying to draw Watford out, but then Sargent would drop deep. That would leave Pukki isolated, and they'd really struggle to progress the football. And so you almost have this systematic struggle of a team trying to move itself up the pitch, but players being drawn to the ball because they're quite isolated and they want a little bit more attacking rhythm. And that is a mismatch and a balance that they need to rediscover and discover quickly, because I just haven't seen enough evidence, and I don't see enough evidence at this moment of time of this 4-3-3 system, 4-2-3-1 system, particularly functioning in the way that Norwich City want it to. And this was a performance I felt that exposed pretty much all of Norwich City's flaws, because that first half, to be honest, was as bad as I've seen them this year. And if that Watford missed the penalty through Loser, brilliant save by Angus Gunn. Josh Sargent scores to give them a lifeline that, to be honest, they didn't really deserve, and Watford could have been out of sight. And that kind of attacking quartet, Norwich City couldn't live with them. Max Aarons couldn't live with Ismail Assar. You look at the first goal; it's very, very poor. It comes from a Norwich corner actually, and the corner deliveries weren't particularly good. But he gets flicked over to the other side. They break. I think Byram's gone across to kind of cover Sar's run. No one covers him. You've got then a back three, a back four that's out of shape. No one picks up Looser at the back post, and even though he scuffs it, because of the space and freedom and time that he has to make a connection with the ball, he's able to find the bottom corner. And suddenly the momentum that certainly the away fans in that block felt after that penalty save almost completely evaporated immediately. And from there, Norwich needed to manage it a little bit. They didn't. Watford got on top, and again, it's another defensive error, a cross from Sar, who somehow gets free of Aarons, across the box. Hanley pokes it into the path of... Who did he poke it into the path of? Asperilla, who then finds Keenan Davis. A little bit of luck involved, but to be honest, Watford probably earned that luck, wanted that luck, fell to Keenan Davis, and from there, as a striker, you should not be missing. He did not miss. And from 2-0, at a place like this, in a game like this, in a circumstance like this, against a team like this, it's very, very difficult to overcome. And I felt Max Aarons in particular had a tough evening. I felt that was reflected in the second half when Dean Smith kind of swapped the fullbacks around. I'm going to use an analogy here, so stay with me. But if anyone can kind of go back in time and cast your mind back and remember what Grant Holt was like under Chris Hughton, where there were flashes, he still scored goals, he was still functional, he was still fine, but the spark wasn't there. And he didn't look like a player that was particularly enjoying himself. He didn't look like a player that Norwich were getting the best out of. And I think he said openly since that he was pretty frustrated with the football. That is kind of what it feels like watching Max Aarons at the minute, because you've gone from a player who was explosive, who could attack at will, who was swashbuckling, who almost didn't need to worry about their defensive responsibilities because they could get forward. And you've got a player who is being curbed from an attacking perspective and maybe is being exposed as not the best 1v1 defender. Max Aarons is primarily a modern fullback. He wants to get forward, he wants to join attacks. And at this level, to be honest, Norwich City should be able to accommodate in that team, but maybe the imbalance in midfield prevents them from doing that. So he's not able to join in attacks, and that just creates, to be honest, a real frustration, because you've got a player there who, throughout his Norwich spell, has been at times one of their best attacking players, and we're just not seeing that at the moment. We're not seeing him utilised in the way that maybe we would like to see him utilised, or utilised in a way that's going to get the best out of him, and that is a real a real problem, because when you've got a player like that who has attracted interest in the past, no doubt he'll attract interest in the future. And Norwich City, of course, the culture, the model that they've tried to create is that players like that, you uplift their value, you sell them for a profit. At the moment in time, it's really difficult to see how they sell Aarons for anywhere near the figures that were mooted around a few years ago, and he just doesn't look to be a player enjoying it at this moment in time. And I felt that's probably been reflected within his performances. So that was kind of the first half. Norwich really struggled. We're lucky to be in the game. Brilliant finish from Josh Sargent. Again, I'll come on to him maybe in a minute. So then Norwich moved in the second half. Isaac Hayden was brought on. Gabriel Sara was brought on. Gibbs and Nunez were off. I felt Isaac Hayden gave them a much better balance. It was really good to see him. Obviously, the backstory there is excellent, considering he's not played a minute for Norwich City, having been their first summer signing. And I felt, to be honest, at times he looked really classy. There were a couple of really good pinged passes, but ultimately it was a midfielder who could win a tackle, which was quite rare and has been quite rare this season. But I just felt structurally it helped Norwich City, it helped McLean, and it helped Sara push up the pitch and press in a little bit better a way, and had a bit more of a structure. I still felt there was a bit of a gaping hole in the middle of the pitch, but he offered them a pretty nice balance and shielded pretty well, and there were points where he dictated the tempo. I did feel he naturally probably kind of ran out of gas towards the end of the game. There was one moment where Norwich had a corner, Watford broke, João Pedro ran pretty much from the edge of the penalty area all the way to the final third in Norwich City's half. Isaac Hayden kept stride of him. To be honest, I was watching it with a face like this, trying to make sure, because it's one of those, a player that's been out for a while, it's one of those where a hamstring goes or a knee pops or something. And actually after that run, he did go down for a little bit and receive a little bit of treatment, but it seems like, touch wood, fingers crossed, that he got through it okay. And, I think we kind of saw suggestions and glimpses and flashes maybe of what we've been waiting for in terms of Isaac Hayden and what he could potentially offer to Norwich City's midfield. Now it's about keeping him fit and managing him. And I don't necessarily think it's a case of, well, he played 45 tonight, he can play 90 on Tuesday. I don't think that's the case. I think it's going to be about integrating him slowly. This is a player that hasn't had a pre-season. But to be honest, Norwich City may need him before he's ready. And that dilemma is going to be really curious for Dean Smith, I feel. Gabriel Sara, I felt, added an off-the-ball intelligence, a pressing intelligence that gave Norwich City an extra onus. He makes some really, really intelligent runs. And actually, next to my colleague Sam Seaman in the press box tonight was a scout from Torino who was monitoring him. And that's not to say anything at this moment in time, but it's interesting. It felt like he'd probably done enough on Saturday to earn a start here tonight. He wasn't afforded one. I think I'd be shocked if we didn't see him now on Tuesday night. His movement's really clever. I think there are a couple of points where he gets a little bit caught out, where he goes to press a bit too intensely and almost gets played around and bypassed a little bit. But Norwich structurally can manage that in the right way if they do it cutely. So you need him to come in now. For me, Josh Sargent needs to move centrally. I think we've seen Tim Krul drop tonight. I think we're at that point now where we need to see Timu Pukki given a little bit of a breather and Josh Sargent given a go down the middle, because his energy, his drive, his hunger, to be honest, at the moment looks a little bit ahead of where Timu Pukki's is. I think his performances have been better than where Pukki's is, and you get the sense that is a man who wants to play centrally. Every time you speak to him, every time you touch base with him and you ask him about playing wide, he is someone who has an inward frustration about his position and where he is being played. So it's time for that to happen. It's time for that transition to take place on Tuesday, I feel. Goodness knows who you put in the attacking midfield positions or where necessarily they go with that, but that needs to happen. It was a better second half. It couldn't have been much worse, but Norwich City didn't have a shot on target, I don't think, in that second half. The closest they came was from a corner where the ball dropped for Grant Hanley. To be honest, if you want a kind of characterisation of their performance, look at the corners in the first half to the second half. Really poor in the first half, some better ones in the second half. Grant Hanley smashed the ball against the bar. That was as close as they came. After that happened, João Pedro then had that instance with Isaac Hayden. And from there, Watford just kind of managed the game a little bit. They sat off them. Norwich tried to invite them on, but Watford were letting them have the ball in areas where they couldn't really hurt them. They really looked like pretty devoid of ideas, to be honest, of how to progress the ball and how to go and hurt them. And as I said, they were trying to invite Watford on, but they were sucking Sargent in, and then they'd go long towards Pukki, and that would leave them a little bit isolated. So, again, systematically, what they were trying to do didn't work, and I didn't think they were set up in the right way. Credit to Dean Smith, because I did feel he realigned it pretty well at half-time, but there was still something at the top end of the pitch that needed addressing for me. And come out from this night and you know, I finished where I started, really. It feels like an opportunity missed. Now, whilst you have to look at it, it's back-to-back defeats, it's 1 win in 5. I don't think there is cause for major concern at this moment. And I've kind of used this expression before. I think I used it in pre-season. There's a warning light flashing for Norwich City. And it's maybe gone from being there and kind of being stable and being present. And you can see it, but it's not flashing. I feel it's flashing now. I feel we're reaching the point where the performances aren't anywhere near the standard they need to be. And I don't necessarily think it's a style of football point. I just don't think that they've been cohesive. They've been disjointed. There were points, particularly in the first half, where they didn't necessarily look particularly well coached, for instance. And it's hard at points to really identify and connect to and spot what they are trying to do on the pitch at points. That's a major concern at this stage of the championship season, to be honest, because when you're in a position where you're winning games but you're not performing well, winning is a sticking plaster, and it acts as something where people can go, okay, we're not playing well, but maybe the wins will breed confidence and we'll see it. And there was a lot of onus put on wins this season by people internally in the football club because of what happened last year, and it felt like it could almost be picked up and thrown aside because they'd win in the championship and everything would be rosy. But actually, the level of their performances, you take the 3 points away, and that's what you get left with, to be completely honest. And they need to find some solutions to that. And I fear the period that they're coming up is going to ask more questions. And if they don't find solutions, the championship is so tight. They could find themselves slipping down the table a little bit. And if that happens, then it would be curious to see how this place, how the fans, how everyone reacted to that. But obviously, let's hope that's not the case. It's an opportunity to put it right at home against Luton, which on paper, and look, football doesn't work like that, we know, looks like their probably most favourable game in the next 5. And even Luton are a good side at this level. So there's no guarantees there. But if we come out of Tuesday night and they haven't won again, I do fear the emotions are going to be pretty raw and pretty high. And again, that's going to be quite difficult to counteract. So there we go. A frustrating night. A night where I felt they were set up wrong, approached it wrong, and were tactically pretty wrong as well. Much improved in the second half, but that wasn't tough. It's going to be interesting to see where we go from here. Thank you all very much for watching. Of course, plenty more reaction on Pinkin.com and the Pinkin Plus app as well. Do download a free trial if you haven't done for that yet. Excuse me, sorry. Because we've got plenty more content and plenty more stuff coming from there. I think I've mentioned everything that I wanted to mention. Andrew Mbamidele got injured. Fingers crossed that's not a bad one. He kind of had to be supported off by 2. It looked like he got his ankle caught in the ground and twisted it a little bit. So Tuesday might come too soon, but let's see. Thank you very much for watching. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, and we'll see you again very, very soon. From Vicarage Road, good night.